Hey guys, this is Nick Mayer. I grew up playing in church and I've been on tour with Zach Williams for the past 4 years. And today I want to talk to you about how to be prepared. Everything from knowing your parts, having the right gear, and knowing what to do in spontaneous moments. In part 2, I'm gonna go over the warm-up routines that I have and the things that I do to prepare before going on stage. So click the link below, enter your email, and we'll send that video to you. All right, let's get started. The first thing I wanna talk to you about is knowing your parts. One of the most important things you can do on a Sunday morning or to a gig is showing up prepared by knowing what you're gonna be playing. The best part about knowing your parts is also you're not creating any distractions when you're playing. When you're messing up because you're not prepared or you haven't practiced, it causes a distraction and it takes away from what you're trying to do, and ultimately that is to lead worship. And as a player, you are a worship leader in your position. It's not just the person singing, it is you behind the guitar, it's you behind the drums, behind the keys, it's you singing. Every single person in the band has a job, and that job is leading worship on a Sunday morning. And so part of that, there's a responsibility. And part of that responsibility is, again, knowing your parts. When you show up prepared, it makes everything go so fluid, and it's so important that I can't stress it enough. Know your parts, know the song, know the structure of the song. So some of the tips on how to do that is listen to the song. I listen to a song at least 5 to 10 times before I even pick up an instrument. Because once you have it in your brain and you've heard it so many times, you kind of naturally know where the song is going to go. The second thing that I do that really helps me is to try to chart it out. If you can and you have the skill set to be able to write out the chart while you're listening to it, that's another really great practice technique to try. The third piece is to actually pick up your guitar, pick up your instrument, and play along with the song. Sometimes it takes a few minutes to try to get the part down, but just keep practicing till you get it. Keep practicing till it becomes muscle memory to where you don't even have to think about it. You can just play it. It's just a part of the song and it's just easy. And then there's no distractions, because when you're playing on Sunday morning, the last thing you need to be doing is trying to remember your part. When it's so natural to you because you're so comfortable with it, it makes everything so much easier. And it frees you up to be able to worship from your position as well, because you're not so focused on what you're playing or you're not focused on messing up. You're just there in the moment, and that is so, so important. The next thing I want to talk about is how to show up prepared with your gear. Before you leave for your church service or your gig, there's a few things that you can do at home to make sure that you're prepared gear-wise. First thing is always check your strings. Make sure your strings are in good condition, because the last thing you want is breaking a string in the middle of a set. I've had it happen. It's not fun. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it snaps on you. Just avoid that altogether by making sure your strings are in good condition. And a way to also keep track of that is after you're done playing, wipe it down with a rag, because if your sweaty fingers get on there, it can kind of eat away at the strings. Wipe it down after you're done playing, put it away in its case. You'll preserve your strings much longer. The other thing you can do is make sure you check your amp. Make sure the tubes are in good working order. Like I said, in that box, if you have extra tubes, you don't necessarily need to worry about that as much, but it's always good just to double check. And then something I always do is I always go through my pedal board. I check all my cables to make sure that they're not crackling, they're not popping, anything like that, that there's a smooth signal going through. So when I show up, I know that I can just plug in and we're good. There's been multiple times when I haven't done that. I show up, I plug in, and there's no sound, and you're just wasting time trying to figure out what's wrong. And that's not the best thing, because you're also wasting other people's time when it's something you could have showed up prepared for. So just keep that in mind, because part of showing up prepared with your gear is honoring your bandmates' times, because you're not having to mess with your equipment. You can just show up, plug in, and play. Something that's really helpful to me is to have a checklist before going to any gig or to show up to church on Sunday. And some of those things on my list include having extra strings, having extra tubes, having all of my cables, so the lead cable from my guitar to my pedal board, having the cable from the pedal board to the amp, having slides, having capos. Really anything that you think you're going to need or will need a backup of, put it on that checklist and tailor it to what you usually take. So if you do take 2 guitars, put the second guitar on your checklist. It doesn't hurt to mark it off. Or if you know you're not using an amp and you're using a Helix or a Kemper or anything like that, make sure that you've got all of the stuff that you know you will personally need on that Sunday morning. So now that you know your parts and all your gears in working order, the next thing to prepare for is the unknown. And it's those moments when worship is spontaneous and you just kind of got to fill in the space. A couple things that I would recommend is know your scales. When you know the song and you know the key that that song is in, if you know your scales, then you know kind of a good reference and a good box to be able to work within. I had a good friend of mine once tell me that there's freedom in the limitations. So when you know the song and you know what everybody else is playing, you know all the parts for it, you know the melody of the song, you know the structure of the song, all of those, use them to your advantage, because when you have those limitations, you know what to listen for. And when you're playing in those moments, try to pay attention to what everybody else is doing. And then it actually frees you up to do what it is that you need to do. So for the scales, I always recommend knowing two types of scales. Know your major scales. So here, let's look at a C major scale. I'm gonna play it for you really quick. Knowing that all up and down, those are the notes that you have to work with whenever you're playing a song in the key of C. Another really important skill to know within the key of C is the pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic for that. For the key of C, you're going to be looking at the A minor pentatonic scale. So you have the C major scale, and then here's the A minor pentatonic scale. And that scale, there's many different versions of that scale. So once you know those two, you can really work with that well when you're in spontaneous moments. So you have a chord progression, you know the melody. If you know those two scales and you know the notes that you have to work with, it frees you up to be able to play a melody or play something that is fitting towards those spontaneous moments. So another really important thing about spontaneous moments is knowing when not to play, when it's time to give the song a little bit of breathing room, when playing a swell actually makes more sense than playing a lead line. So something that I like to do is to take just a really long delay with quite a bit of reverb, just fill some space. Rather than just playing a bunch of notes, just try to just sit with the song and do something kind of like this. So for you, that might seem a little boring, but for that moment, maybe that's what's needed. And it's not necessarily about what you want to fill the space with, but more of what that space needs to be filled with. And so being mindful of that, that's another way you can be prepared, is knowing your pedal board and knowing the colors and the things that you can bring to that song. And if you need to be ambient, then to make sure that you know your delay pedals and that you know your reverb pedals to be able to do that. That's very important for being able to play spontaneously, is knowing the different textures that you can create with what you have to work with. Part of doing that is actually having those sounds already programmed into your pedals, and that's something that you need to be doing at home before you show up. So if you know you're doing a song that's going to have a spontaneous moment, make sure you have those settings already dialed in to your pedal board, whether it's in your delay pedal or in your reverb. Make sure you've got those settings ready to go, so when that spontaneous moment comes up, you're not adjusting all your pedals, but you're ready to go and you're there. And this is the next thing I want to talk to you about. At the end of the day, follow your worship leader and pay attention to what's happening in the room. When you know your parts, frees you up from distraction and frees you up to be able to engage in the moment and engage in worship. When you're on your worship team, you're bringing an offering and you always want to bring your best. So that's why it's so important to show up prepared with your parts, with the gear, knowing what to do in those spontaneous moments, and being prepared spiritually, so that way everything is just an overflow from there. All right, so now I want to talk to you about my personal warm-up routines and the things that I do to prepare before going on stage. So click the link below, enter your email, and we'll send that video right over to you. I'll see you there.